Alright, YouTube, it looks like according to one email released by WikiLeaks, I believe this was the last batch a day ago, not the newest batch. One of Clinton's staffers called a Democratic operative that had begun working for the Sanders campaign, somebody who apparently was familiar with the Clintons, comfortable with them, but decided to go with Sanders, called him a fucker. Now, I'm sure that this kind of language goes on quite often within political campaigns. Uh, at least for some people, I'm sure they do feel personally snubbed at times by the ever evolving series of alliances that are created and broken within politics, even within a party that otherwise is completely colluding together, as we've seen with the DNC and what they did during the primaries or something like that. But it is I'm sure it's not a great help with getting the Sanders fans on board. Of course, they also called Bernie Sanders a doofus. You've got fairly open collusion with people like Donna Brazile, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, as far as trying to stymie anybody that might challenge Hillary Clinton. You've got a fairly large degree, I think, of animosity to the point at which they apparently did have to bribe Sanders to get his endorsement. I think that in many ways he didn't want to endorse her because probably for him it's political suicide. Because Bernie Sanders is reliant upon the population of Vermont to keep him in office, a relatively small population that does not support Clintonian Democratic policies. It's an overwhelmingly blue state, both Democratic partisans and leftists. But when she's calling anti-fracking groups a Russian conspiracy and going predominantly after ma guns and ma race as social issues, that doesn't play well to what Vermonters have a tendency, including Democratic partisans within the state, happen to support. It's a very environmentalist state. It's not an anti-gun state. Most of the actual liberals that are here don't feel strongly about wanting gun control. This has been shown time and time and time again. We defeated Bloomberg-style gun control. We've defeated other efforts. It looks like Sue Minter, who's the Democratic candidate for governor, is probably going to lose. I've seen no support for her. This is the swing state part of the state of Vermont. It's the most sort of middling area. Some parts actually are quite Republican, Northeast Kingdom maybe, and then the Burlington area and a few other locations, certainly Brattleboro or Woodstock, they're heavily Democratic. Rutland, though, this county, is the swing state portion of Vermont. I don't think I've seen a single sign for Sue Minter. And also, I will say, there are increasingly a lot of Trump signs here, and I've only ever seen one for Hillary. There's finally one Hillary Clinton 2016 sign in the city. There are, I think, a half a dozen Trump signs that I've counted. And in an area as small as Rutland, it's easy to get a pretty good view of what's actually there. I've seen many, many dozens of Phil Scott signs. I've still yet to see a Sue Minter sign. The only Democrat around here that seems to have any considerable support is actually my former high school teacher, Miss Hooker, who's running, I believe, for a Senate position. And I'll be voting for her. I don't care that she's a Democrat. She's further left than Obama, but I'm still going to vote for her. High school pride or something like that. It doesn't matter. She was a nice person, so, she'll get my vote. Yeah, it is a little bit more anecdote related as opposed to maybe policy related, but this is Vermont, let's face it. It's not going to make a big deal. Looks like McMullen is going to get elected. If I was a betting man, though, I'd say Phil Scott's going to run away with this. For a state like Vermont to choose a Republican, usually it doesn't happen unless the Democrats are really screwing up. Let's face it, it's like Shumlin. Shumlin had a very difficult time the last time around getting reelected. Scott Milne, I believe his name was, very almost defeated him. Technically speaking, Shumlin should have lost, because Milnes won a plurality of counties, and the representatives from those counties are supposed to vote with the county's results. Technically, he should have won on that accord. He didn't contest it, and it was the right thing to do. And Shumlin, of course, is resigning. He's not going to seek re-election because he knows that nobody wants him. When a fairly far left, fiscally speaking, Democratic governor gets kicked out of the state of Vermont, there's a fucking problem at the time. But no, yeah, there's plenty of this stuff going on. And I'm sure it goes on in the Trump campaign too, probably in Johnson's campaign, Stein's campaign. They email each other, they talk to each other on the phone, they say all sorts of shit on each other. As far as alienating Sanders fans, though, there are several problems with that. Number one, that increasingly hurts you with the younger electorate if you're Hillary Clinton, because Bernie Sanders supporters, a lot of them, tended to be very young voters. That's not good. The Democratic Party needs those voters, even if only for the down ballot races, even if Clinton were 20 points ahead, so it's going to be a problem. Number two, it probably hurts you in New Hampshire because he's got almost as much support there as he does here in Vermont. And for Bernie, really, all this diatribe hurts him. He hasn't been trotted out on the campaign stage lately. Why do you think that is? It's because of all of these different emails and so forth, where Clinton fans and operatives and staffers are talking shit about Sanders supporters. And increasingly, it looks like if Bernie Sanders gets up on stage, he's going to be called a sellout even by his own fans. So it's not helpful, certainly to her campaign, to have this sort of stuff getting leaked. Of course, she shrugs aside and talks about a Russian conspiracy. I'll be making a little bit of a video about that in a minute. But no, not helpful for her at all, because apparently they think anyone who aligned themselves with Sanders was a fucker, was an idiot, a doofus, they live in their parents' basement and so forth. It's very, very funny to see. I think it must be slightly jarring for people who think that Clinton is like some figure of virtue. Oh, she loves women's rights and gay rights, and she's going to clean up the streets, keep us away from war, and all these delusional things they think she's going to do, which she won't do any of them, honestly. Must be a little bit jarring to hear those who she trusts to be very close with her, so that they're coordinating directly with her campaign manager, John Podesta, to talk about her political opponents in such a manner. It must be a little bit odd for them to see, because they've got this thick veil of wool over their eyes, so to speak, by which they can't see any of Clinton's faults. The way they see Clinton is the way in Bush's second term, a lot of partisan Republicans continued to look at Bush as though he was a good thing, and refused to acknowledge that, yes, indeed, he was a war hawk. He was corrupt. He was in favor of police state mass surveillance. He was destroying our economy. He was a screwball. He didn't know what he was doing. He was inept. Not retarded. He knew what he was doing in the corrupt sense, but he didn't know how to govern at the same time in any logical manner. I think Clinton would be the same way. And I sparred with these people at the time. For several years, I ended up sparring a lot with Bush fans, especially on Facebook at the time, which was more of the Wild West than it is now today. And a lot of people, no matter what you told them, no matter what scandal you pointed to, how many facts and figures or sources you had at your disposal, they refused to believe, and these weren't even paid shills, these were just Republican partisans, they refused to believe that he was doing anything wrong. I see that increasingly with Clinton's small but substantial core of support. Not all of these people are paid shills. Some of them, unironically, they look at the D after her name and the fact that she has boobs, and they assume that she's filled with virtue by result of this. It's actually very strange how people have this strange mentality. Sort of like a sports rivalry, arguments over religion, things like that. People fall into these various sort of football team style camps, and then they lash out at one another. And they, through their cognitive dissonance, they can't even admit what their own candidate's done wrong. Of course, in full disclosure, I've never been nor ever will be a member of the Republican Party. I'm supporting Trump because I think he's a better candidate. Not because I have anything to do with the GOP. As far as I'm concerned, most of them shouldn't be reelected any more than most of the Democrats should be reelected. Now, honestly, I hope both of these parties fall apart and destroy themselves, but that being said, Clinton wants to start a nuclear war, potentially, so I'm going to hammer her. I'm not going to hammer Trump. I'm not going to start rambling about all the faults that Trump has ever had when he's not the one antagonizing a bunch of nuclear powers at the moment. That's about all. Peace out.